let's assume we agree on that. Why is the vice president of the United States, why did he campaign for a Kremlin toady in Hungary? Can you explain that to me?
Well, yes, but it's also part of why has the United States switched sides in the Cold War? For people who say, well, you can trace all this back to Ronald Reagan would roll over in his grave if he could see how, what Donald Trump has done to American foreign policy. The campaigning for Viktor Orban just seemed like the cherry on the cake that we have seen of Donald Trump turning away from all of the liberal democracies of our allies to embrace authoritarian thugs. You can tell that he's got a real fetish for people like Vladimir Putin, for Viktor Orban, for the other strong men who he has been supporting. The fact that this year he was actually threatening to go to war, attack our NATO allies because he wanted to swallow up Greenland. Now, there are people around here who think, oh, he was just trolling, don't take him seriously, you should, all that stuff. Well, that was bullshit because the Europeans took it very, very seriously. So we are in a moment where Donald Trump has rejected and repudiated not just sort of the neoconservatives of the Bush era, but the entire bipartisan foreign policy of the United States of America stretching back to World War II. So when you had this moment where Donald Trump is aligned with Vladimir Putin, supporting this autocratic, corrupt thug in Hungary, it's just the latest in what is a very, very consistent pattern. And this is also one of the reasons why I'm saying do not confuse this with some sort of a logical continuity from, well, this was inevitable from Nixon to Reagan to Bush to Mitt Romney, John McCain. No.
Yeah. Some are saying this was his Nixon goes to China, right? By somehow, and I've heard people say, well, President Nixon, and again, after President Nixon had, let's just say, in terms of foreign policy, the former president was successful in peeling away the People's Republic of China from the USSR. That was of great strategic interest for us. All right, so when people say that, right, when people are saying, well, this is eight-dimensional chess, 20-dimensional chess, but you just looking at this soberly and saying, no, it just seems very kind of, habdashery and sort of, what do you say to those people who are saying he's just an misunderstood genius of geostrategy?
Well, I think those people are telling on themselves because, what is the genius? We're isolated in the world. We don't have a coalition of the willing. He got a wall of no when he asked people to come to his support. Nobody can figure out what the end game is in Iran. We have wars of whim. In terms of political strategy, Vladimir Putin, is going to emerge from this stronger. China is going to emerge from this stronger. We are going to, in our isolation, the rest of the world is now looking on the United States of America, not as a shining city on a hill, not as the leader of the free world, but as a rogue nation that threatens to annihilate civilizations. I mean, it is so grotesque. And then this attempt to try to, bolt on some sort of grand strategy. Donald Trump does not know from day to day what he's doing. And I think that what we also realize is that there's been a lot of loose talk about the madman theory and the madman strategy. People ought to recognize that there's a very thin line between the madman theory and just being a madman. And I think we're seeing that play out too.
Does Donald Trump's challenges, would you argue they don't come from ideology, that they're character?
Oh, yeah. This is something else. I'm really glad you mentioned this. Conservatives used to understand, and this is the heart of the conservative understanding of society in the world, which is that culture determines the kind of politics you get, that culture matters, character matters. And go back into the 1990s and how often conservatives would say, that the character matters, and all of those things. When Bill Clinton was in the White House, the abandonment of character has been one of the great betrayals of the conservative movement, but also a tell that a conservative movement that would be so involved in the enshittification of culture and and also turning its back on the importance of character is not a conservative movement anymore. So your point is, look, Donald Trump is not a man of ideas. He has certain fetishes, certain obsessions. He does believe in tariffs, I believe. I mean, there are certain things that are sort of locked and loaded for him. But he's not a man of principle. He's a man who, why is he attacking the Pope, really? It's not theologically based. He's attacking the Pope because the Pope is just one more guy that's said bad things about him. And if you say something bad about Donald Trump in his black and white world, then you're a bad guy. And so much of this is like, who do I like? Who do I hate? Who's sucked up to me? Who will give me what I want? Who will give me my dopamine hit? What will my base, get jazzed about? And Donald Trump, you could almost predict what Donald Trump is going to do if you sort of, kind of reverse engineer, what is playing in certain social media. So this whole thing of Donald Trump, the great leader, Donald Trump's also a follower. Donald Trump is a deeply, deeply insecure, nasty little boy at heart.